James Mitchell was 34 years old and earning $58,000 a year as a high school history teacher when his wife's family made him stand outside during his own father's funeral reception. And what the reading of the will revealed 3 hours later would cost them everything they'd spent 20 years building. The November rain hammered against the windows of Riverside Memorial Chapel on East 76th Street in Manhattan as James stood in the hallway, his $89 Target suit soaked through. Inside the reception room, his wife Catherine's family, the Westbrooks of Westbrook Capital Management, worth an estimated $47 million, laughed and drank $300 bottles of Chateau Margaux while his father lay in a casket 50 feet away. "The help doesn't belong in here during family time," Catherine's mother, Patricia Westbrook, had announced loudly when James tried to enter. "Though I suppose he thinks he's family now." James had heard worse from them over the past 8 years of marriage. But today, at his father's funeral, something inside him finally cracked. Not enough to make a scene, he'd learned that the Westbrooks fed on confrontation like sharks on blood, but enough to make him remember what his father, Robert Mitchell, had whispered to him in the hospital 3 weeks ago, when the pancreatic cancer had reduced him to 97 pounds of translucent skin and jutting bones. "Let them think they've won, son. Just wait for the lawyers." James had thought it was the morphine talking. His father had been a janitor at PS 147 in the Bronx for 41 years, retiring with a pension of $31,000 annually. He'd lived in the same rent-controlled apartment on Grand Concourse since 1983, paying $847 a month for a 2-bedroom that would cost $3,200 on the open market. The most valuable thing James thought his father owned was a 2006 Honda Civic with 187,000 miles on it. He had no idea how wrong he was. "James, sweetie, maybe you should just wait in the car?" Catherine appeared in the hallway, her $2,400 Burberry dress immaculate, her expression that particular blend of pity and embarrassment she'd perfected over the years. "Daddy's telling the story about the time you tried to explain cryptocurrency to him at the country club, and everyone's laughing so hard." "It's my father's funeral, Catherine." "I know, baby, I know. But you know how my family is. Just give them an hour, okay? Then we'll go home, and I'll make your favorite lasagna and—" "Mr. Mitchell?" A man in an impeccable charcoal suit appeared at the end of the hallway, carrying a leather briefcase with the gold-embossed logo of Thornton, Rothschild and Associates, one of the most expensive law firms in New York, with partners billing at $1,200 per hour. "I'm Marcus Thornton. This is difficult timing, but we need to conduct the reading of the will today, as specified in Mr. Robert Mitchell's final wishes. The conference room is ready." Catherine's face went pale. "Will? What will? James, your father didn't have anything to—" Apparently, he did. James felt something strange rising in his chest. Not quite hope. He'd had that beaten out of him years ago by the Westbrooks. But something close to it. "Where's the conference room?" "3rd floor. I've already notified the other interested parties." "Other parties?" Catherine's voice climbed an octave. "What other parties?" "Your family, Mrs. Mitchell. Your father insisted they be present. If you enjoy stories of shocking family secrets and sweet revenge against the wealthy elite, with a sweet reconciliation at the ending, kindly like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new stories here every day, each one more intense than the last one. And tell me in the comment where you are watching from. The conference room on the 3rd floor of Riverside Memorial Chapel was designed for exactly these occasions. Families gathering to divide estates, to discover secrets, to fight over money while a body cooled in the basement. The mahogany table could seat 20. Today, it held 12. On one side, Patricia Westbrook, 61, in her $8,700 Chanel suit. Her husband Richard Westbrook, 64, founder and CEO of Westbrook Capital Management. Their son Brandon Westbrook, 36, hedge fund manager with a $340,000 annual salary plus bonuses. Their daughter Melissa Westbrook Chen, 33, married to a plastic surgeon and living off a $2.1 million trust fund, and Catherine. On the other side, James, alone. "This is absurd," Patricia declared, her 3-carat diamond ring from Tiffany & Co., retail price $127,000, catching the light as she gestured dismissively. "Marcus, I don't know what that old janitor told you, but there's clearly been some mistake. The Mitchells don't have estates, they have garage sales." Brandon snorted into his whiskey. Pappy Van Winkle, 23-year, $3,500 a bottle, which he'd brought from the reception. "This is priceless. Dad, can you imagine? Maybe he's leaving James his mop collection. Finally, something he's qualified to inherit." "Brandon," Catherine said weakly, but she didn't look at James. She never looked at James when her family attacked him. Marcus Thornton remained completely professional, unmoved by the Westbrooks' sneering. He'd been a lawyer for 23 years, had handled estates worth hundreds of millions. He'd seen every variety of human greed and cruelty. But there was something in his eyes, just a flicker, that made James think the man knew exactly what was coming and was enjoying the anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here for the reading of the last will and testament of Robert James Mitchell, deceased November 15th, 2024, at Mount Sinai Hospital. Mr. Mitchell worked with our firm for the past 18 years to structure his estate and ensure his final wishes were executed precisely." 18 years? Richard Westbrook frowned. "That's impossible. Your firm charges what, $500 an hour minimum? Our standard rate is $1,200 per hour, Mr. Westbrook. Mr. Mitchell paid in full, in advance, for all services rendered. Total fees came to approximately $67,000 over the 18-year period." The Westbrooks exchanged glances. James felt dizzy. $67,000 in legal fees? His father, who clipped coupons from the Sunday newspaper, who bought day-old bread from the bakery on 188th Street, who had never, in James's entire life, taken a vacation that wasn't camping in the Catskills. "This is a scam," Patricia announced. "I'm calling our attorney." "You're welcome to do so, Mrs. Westbrook. However, I should mention that you are specifically named in the will, which is why your presence was requested. Leaving now would mean forfeiting your opportunity to hear what Mr. Mitchell had to say to you." That stopped her. The Westbrooks didn't forfeit anything. Marcus Thornton opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick document bound in navy leather. "I'll begin with the preliminary statements. I, Robert James Mitchell, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all previous wills and codicils. I have prepared this document with full knowledge of its contents and implications, having been advised by legal counsel at Thornton, Rothschild and Associates for the past 18 years. James's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against the mahogany table. "First, I wish to address the financial inventory of my estate. At the time of this document's preparation, my total assets are valued at approximately $74.3 million. The room exploded. Patricia Westbrook's champagne glass, Baccarat crystal, $85 per glass, shattered on the marble floor. Richard choked on his whiskey. Brandon's face went from smirking confidence to pale shock in under 3 seconds. Melissa grabbed her husband's arm, her perfectly manicured nails, weekly appointments at La Bella Vita, $150 per session, digging into his Armani suit jacket. Catherine just stared at James, her mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. "That's impossible," Richard managed. $74 million? From a janitor's salary? This is fraud. This is... Mr. Westbrook, I assure you every dollar is accounted for and legal. Mr. Mitchell was quite thorough in his documentation. Would you like me to continue?" "Yes," James heard himself say. His voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. "Please continue." Marcus Thornton allowed himself the smallest smile. The source of my wealth requires explanation, as it will surprise those who knew me only as a custodial worker. In 1983, I inherited $127,000 from my uncle, Vincent Mitchell, who had no children of his own. Rather than spend this money, I invested it carefully and conservatively. I purchased a small apartment building in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, for $78,000, a neighborhood that was considered undesirable at the time. I lived frugally, continued working my job, and reinvested all rental income. James remembered that building. His father had sold it in 2005, and James had thought it was because he needed money for medical bills his mother had accumulated before she died. Over the next 41 years, I bought and sold 17 properties in Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx, always ahead of gentrification patterns. I purchased stock in Apple Computer in 1985 for $3 per share and held it through every split. I bought Amazon at $18 per share in 1997. I invested in Google's IPO in 2004. I purchased Bitcoin in 2011 when it traded at $7 per coin. I now hold 847 Bitcoin, currently valued at approximately $31.2 million at today's market price of $36,850 per coin. Brandon Westbrook looked like he was going to vomit. He'd spent the last 5 Christmases explaining to James, very slowly, as if to a child, how cryptocurrency was a scam that only idiots fell for. I lived as a janitor because I enjoyed the work. I liked the students at PS 147. I liked having a purpose and a routine. I did not live frugally because I was poor. I lived frugally because I am not a fool. Every dollar I didn't spend on useless luxuries was a dollar that could grow, compound, and eventually provide security for my only son, James Robert Mitchell. James felt wetness on his cheeks and realized he was crying. His father, his quiet, humble father, who had packed his lunch in a brown paper bag every day, who had taught James that true wealth wasn't about impressing others, but about having choices, had been worth more than the entire Westbrook family combined. Now, to the distribution of my estate, Marcus Thornton continued, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. To my beloved son, James Robert Mitchell, I leave the entirety of my financial assets, all properties, stocks, bonds, cryptocurrency holdings, and cash accounts totaling $74.3 million. This includes the following specific assets. The lawyer began reading a list that seemed to go on forever. 3 apartment buildings in Brooklyn, currently generating $42,000 in monthly rental income. A mixed-use property in Queens worth $3.7 million. Stock portfolios with Fidelity, $12.4 million. Vanguard, $8.9 million. And Charles Schwab, $6.2 million. Checking and savings accounts at Chase Bank totaling $1.8 million. The Bitcoin wallet worth $31.2 million. James couldn't process it. The numbers were too big, too impossible. This morning he'd been a high school teacher who drove a 2012 Toyota Camry with a cracked windshield. Now he was worth more than most people would earn in 1,000 lifetimes. This is bullshit, Brandon slammed his hand on the table. He's contesting this. We're contesting this. That old man was clearly senile, and James obviously manipulated. Mr. Westbrook, Marcus Thornton's voice cut through the room like a knife. I would advise you to remain silent until I've finished reading, because the next section specifically addresses you and your family. The Westbrooks fell silent, but their faces were twisted with rage and disbelief. However, Marcus continued, before James can claim his inheritance, there is one condition he must fulfill, and several specific bequests I wish to make to the Westbrook family. Catherine grabbed James's hand across the table. See, there's a condition. You might not get it. We need to talk to our lawyer. We need to. James pulled his hand away. For the first time in 8 years, he pulled his hand away from his wife. To Patricia Westbrook, who once told my son at a family dinner that he would never amount to anything because ambition isn't genetic and certainly isn't contagious. I leave the sum of $1 in this message. You are correct that ambition isn't genetic. If it were, your children might have earned something rather than simply inheriting it. I hope this single dollar brings you more joy than your millions have, though I doubt it will. You are a small, bitter woman who measures worth in designer labels because you have no internal value to offer the world. Patricia's face went purple. Richard grabbed her arm, but she was shaking with fury, unable to speak. To Richard Westbrook, who told James at his and Catherine's wedding reception that teachers are just failed businessmen who couldn't hack it in the real world, I leave $1 in this message. I made my fortune through patience, wisdom, and careful planning. You made yours through your father's connections and by exploiting legal loopholes in the tax code. Loopholes I documented extensively and provided to the IRS in a sealed envelope to be opened upon my death. Richard's face went from red to white. He's bluffing. That's slander. I'll sue. The evidence includes copies of documents from the Cayman Islands accounts, records of the shell corporations in Delaware, and testimony from employees at Westbrook Capital Management who were paid by me over the past 12 years to document your illegal activities. The IRS estimates you owe approximately $18.7 million in back taxes and penalties. The room went silent except for Richard's ragged breathing. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you have not, because the ending of this story will blow your mind. And drop a comment below telling me what you think James should do next. Marcus Thornton turned a page. To Brandon Westbrook, who told James at Thanksgiving 2022 that he was dragging down the family's collective net worth by existing, I leave $1. I also leave you the knowledge that I purchased short positions against every major investment your hedge fund made in the past 3 years. When news of your father's IRS investigation becomes public, your investors will flee, your fund will collapse, and those short positions, which I've left to James, will be worth approximately $4.3 million. Brandon looked like he might actually faint. To Melissa Westbrook Chen, who laughed when Catherine told her that James had asked for a raise at work because they were struggling to pay bills, I leave $1 and the information that your husband has been having an affluent with his surgical nurse for the past 14 months. Her name is Amanda Rosenberg. She's 26 years old, and he's been paying for her apartment in Hoboken, $3,400 per month, using money from the joint account you believe is for business expenses. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago when James mentioned you'd been particularly cruel to Catherine lately. I thought you might be dealing with problems at home. I was correct. Melissa's perfectly composed face crumpled. She turned to her husband, who wouldn't meet her eyes. And finally, to my daughter-in-law, Catherine Mitchell, who I once hoped would be a true partner to my son. Marcus Thornton's voice softened slightly. I leave you nothing directly because you already have access to everything James does. But I leave you with a choice and a truth. Catherine was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks, her hands trembling. The choice is this. You can remain married to James and share in his inheritance, living a life of financial security you could never have imagined. Or you can choose your family, the family that has spent 8 years teaching you to be ashamed of the good, kind, hard-working man you married. But you cannot have both. The truth is this. I have been documenting every family gathering, every holiday, every wedding and birthday party for the past 8 years. James thought I was simply taking photos and videos like any proud father, but I was also recording audio on a device in my shirt pocket. I have 127 hours of your family mocking, belittling, and emotionally abusing my son while you stood by and said nothing, while you laughed along, while you chose them over him again and again and again. Catherine's sobs were the only sound in the room. James's condition for receiving his inheritance is simple. He must listen to these recordings, all of them, and then decide whether he wishes to remain married to you. The recordings are stored with Marcus Thornton and will be provided to James in their entirety. After he has listened to them, he has 6 months to make his decision. If he chooses to divorce you, you will receive nothing from his inheritance. I have structured a prenuptial trust that supersedes your marital assets, legally reviewed and approved by 3 separate law firms. If he chooses to remain married to you, you will share in his wealth. But know this, Catherine, he will have heard every laugh, every cruel joke, every moment you chose your family's approval over your husband's dignity. And he will make his choice with full knowledge of who you truly are. Marcus Thornton closed the will. That concludes the reading. Mr. Mitchell, I have the recordings on encrypted drives in my office. When you're ready, we can schedule a time for you to review them. James stood. His legs felt like water, but he managed to stay upright. He looked at his wife, her tear-stained face, her trembling hands, the Cartier watch, wedding gift from her parents, $8,900, on her wrist that cost more than he made in 2 months. He looked at her family, their shock, their rage, their sudden fear as they realized the poor relation they'd mocked for 8 years was now the richest person in the room. The person who held evidence that could destroy them all. I'll listen to them, James said quietly, all of them, and then we'll see. He walked out of the conference room, leaving them all behind, and for the first time in 8 years, no one followed him to tell him he was making a mistake. The apartment James shared with Catherine on the Upper West Side, a 900-square-foot one-bedroom that cost them $3,200 a month, eating up half his post-tax salary, felt different when he returned that evening. Smaller, shabbier, more honest. Catherine hadn't come home with him. She'd stayed with her family, presumably to strategize, to plan their next move. James didn't care. For the first time since their wedding at the Plaza Hotel, cost $180,000, paid entirely by the Westbrooks, he actively preferred being alone. His phone had been ringing constantly. Catherine, 47 missed calls. Patricia Westbrook, 23. Brandon, 15. Even Melissa, who normally wouldn't be caught dead communicating directly with him, 8 missed calls and a text message that read simply, "We need to talk." He blocked them all. Instead, he sat on the worn IKEA couch, purchased for $499 in 2019. Catherine had complained about it weekly, and opened his laptop. Marcus Thornton had sent an encrypted email with login credentials to a secure server. The subject line read, "Your father's gift." Inside were 127 audio files, each labeled with a date and location. Christmas 2017, Westbrook Estate, Greenwich, Connecticut. Thanksgiving 2019, Westbrook Apartment, Park Avenue. Catherine's birthday 2021, The River Cafe, Brooklyn. Easter 2023, Westbrook Country Club. James started with the oldest file, from December 24th, 2017, 6 months after their wedding. His father's voice came through first, slightly muffled. "James, hand me your coat, I'll hang it up." Then laughter from the main room. Patricia's voice, loud and clear. "I give it 2 years, 3 at most. She's already embarrassed to introduce him to our friends." Richard's response. "He's a nice enough kid, not bright, but nice." "Nice doesn't pay for private schools or beach houses in the Hamptons," Patricia said. "She'll wake up eventually." Then Catherine's voice, the sound that had whispered, "I love you," to James that morning. "Mom, stop, he might hear you." "Oh, please, he knows what he is. Why do you think he grabbed onto you so fast? You're his ticket to a better life." "That's not, we love each other." "Love." Patricia's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Darling, you love Chanel and summers in Tuscany. You tolerate him." Catherine's response was barely audible. "It's not like that." "Then prove me wrong. Bring him to the club tomorrow. Introduce him to the Vandermans and the Rothsteins. Watch him try to talk about his students while they discuss their yacht clubs and art collections. If you're not mortified within an hour, I'll drop it. A pause. Then Catherine. Fine, but you have to promise to be nice. I'm always nice, darling. James stopped the recording. His hands were shaking. He remembered that day, December 25th, 2017, going to the Greenwich Country Club. Catherine had been tense all morning, snapping at him about his tie from Men's Warehouse, $47.99. His shoes, Clark's, $89. His conversation topics. At the time, he'd thought she was stressed about seeing her parents. Now he understood she'd been preparing to be embarrassed. And she had been. He'd seen it in her eyes every time he spoke about his job, his students, the school's budget problems. She'd steered him away from conversations, made excuses to leave early, been silent the entire drive home. That night she'd cried and told him she loved him. He'd held her and believed her. He pressed play on the next file. Over the next 6 hours, James listened to Christmas dinners and birthday parties, engagement celebrations, and casual Sunday brunches. He heard his father-in-law explain to a business associate that Catherine married a teacher of all things. We're hoping it's a phase. He heard Brandon tell a group of friends that my sister's husband is basically a professional babysitter with a degree. He heard Melissa describe him as sweet but dim to her husband's colleagues. And through it all, he heard Catherine, not defending him, not arguing, not leaving, just agreeing. Softly, reluctantly sometimes, but always ultimately agreeing. I know he's not what you wanted for me, Mom. He does try his best, even if his best isn't very impressive. Sometimes I wonder what life would have been like if I'd married someone like Dylan Rothstein. He started his own investment firm last year. I love James, but I'm not blind to his limitations. The worst came from Thanksgiving 2022, file number 76. James had asked his principal for a raise that week, $3,500 more per year, bringing his salary to $61,500. The principal had approved it. James had been excited to tell Catherine, proud that his work was being recognized. He heard himself in the recording, telling the family at dinner. Then silence. Then Brandon's laugh. $61,000. $61,000. I spend that on my car insurance and wine budget combined. More laughter. Then Patricia. Well, at least the bar for exciting news is very low in your household, dear. And Catherine, his wife, the woman he'd held that morning and called the love of his life. I know it's not much, but it's a big deal for James. Let him have this. Not, he works hard and deserves it. Not, be respectful of my husband. Just, let him have this. Like he was a child being humored with a participation trophy. James stopped the recording at 2:47 a.m., having made it through 89 of the 127 files. He felt hollowed out, scraped raw. Every memory of the past 8 years was recontextualizing itself in his mind. Every time Catherine had asked him not to talk about work at parties. Every time she'd suggested he might be happier with his teacher friends instead of joining her family events. Every time she'd told him to let her handle conversations with her parents about money. She hadn't been protecting him from their cruelty. She'd been protecting them from his embarrassment. His phone buzzed, a blocked number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Mitchell? Marcus Thornton's voice. I apologize for calling so late. I wanted to check in. Many people find the recordings difficult to process. You knew what was in them. I helped your father organize them, yes. He listened to each one multiple times. Why didn't he tell me? All these years he knew what they said about me, how Catherine let them say it, and he never. He wanted to. Many times. But he was a wise man, Mr. Mitchell. He knew that if he told you, you might not believe it. You might think he was trying to sabotage your marriage out of jealousy or class resentment. But evidence? Evidence you can't argue with. James laughed, a bitter sound. He was thorough. He loved you very much, and he understood something important. Financial security gives you the freedom to make choices based on what's right, not what's necessary. Right now, you need Catherine financially. You can't afford to divorce her. You'd lose the apartment, struggle to pay legal fees, possibly damage your career if she turned vindictive. But with your inheritance, you're free. Free to choose who you want in your life based on how they treat you, not based on economics. She's called me 47 times. I imagine she has. The Westbrooks are facing several significant problems. Richard's IRS investigation will begin within the week. Your father was quite thorough in documenting their offshore accounts. Brandon's hedge fund is built on his family's reputation and connections. When Richard goes down, Brandon follows. Melissa's husband has already moved out, according to my sources. And Patricia's entire social circle knows by now that she's been cut out of a major inheritance after mocking the beneficiary for years. How do you know all this? Your father paid me well to stay informed. He wanted you protected. James looked around the small apartment, at the shabby furniture Catherine had always hated, at the water stain on the ceiling from the upstairs neighbor's broken pipe, at the stack of student papers he'd been grading when his father died. This had been his life, small, contained, manageable, safe. What do I do now? That's entirely up to you, Mr. Mitchell. You have 6 months to decide about your marriage. But I'd recommend you start by moving somewhere you actually want to live. Perhaps somewhere without painful memories. After Thornton hung up, James pulled up Zillow on his laptop. He filtered for Manhattan apartments in his new price range, which was essentially unlimited. Penthouses in Tribeca, $12.4 million. Luxury condos in Soho, $8.9 million. Historic brownstones in the West Village, $15.7 million. He could buy any of them. In cash. The thought was dizzying. Instead, he searched for something simpler. A 3-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn Heights, near his father's old neighborhood. Exposed brick, large windows, a view of the Manhattan skyline. Listed at $2.3 million, he could buy it tomorrow without even denting his inheritance. His phone buzzed again. Catherine, from her mother's phone. Please, James, we need to talk. I love you. I know I've made mistakes, but I love you. He stared at the message for a long time. Did she love him? Had she ever? Or had she loved the idea of a safe, controllable husband who would never threaten her family's dominance in their marriage? He opened file number 127, the most recent recording. His father's retirement party at PS 147, 6 months before his cancer diagnosis. Catherine had come reluctantly, complained about parking, spent most of the evening on her phone. He heard himself introducing Catherine to Mrs. Rodriguez, a colleague. This is my wife, Catherine. Catherine, Mrs. Rodriguez teaches chemistry. Lovely to meet you, Catherine said. Then, to someone else, Brandon, visiting from the city for dinner afterward. Can we leave soon? This is depressing. All these people celebrating someone's retirement after 40 years of making minimum wage. It's not minimum wage, Brandon's voice, amused. It's slightly above minimum wage, very slightly. I don't know how James does it, every day surrounded by this mediocrity. Don't tell him I said that. Your secret's safe with me. Though honestly, isn't he kind of the definition of... Brandon, stop. What? It's not mean if it's true. He's a nice guy, Catherine, but let's be honest. He's not going to change the world teaching teenagers about the Civil War. He's not going to make money. He's not going anywhere. You could have married Dylan Rothstein and been living in a penthouse with a Porsche Cayenne. Instead, you're in a 1-bedroom walk-up with a guy who thinks Olive Garden is fine dining. A long pause. Then Catherine. I know. Just that. I know. Not, he's a good man. Not, I don't care about money. Not, I love him. Just, I know. James closed his laptop. Something in his chest, something that had been cracking slowly over the past 8 hours, finally broke completely. Not with anger, not with tears, just with a quiet, certain clarity. He picked up his phone and called Marcus Thornton. "I need you to do 3 things for me," James said. "First, start the paperwork for a divorce. I want the prenuptial trust activated immediately. Catherine gets nothing from my inheritance." "Understood. Second, I want to buy an apartment. Send me a real estate agent who can work quickly. Budget is $3 million or under. I want to be moved out by the end of the week." "Done. And third, I want you to schedule a meeting with the IRS agent handling Richard Westbrook's case. I have additional information that might be helpful to their investigation." There was a smile in Thornton's voice. "Your father would be proud, Mr. Mitchell. He always said you were kinder than the Westbrooks deserved, but never stupid." I'm done being kind to people who think kindness is weakness. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in James's situation. Catherine appeared at the apartment the next morning at 6:47 a.m., looking like she hadn't slept. Her $2,400 Burberry dress from the funeral was wrinkled, her makeup smeared. She still looked beautiful. She'd always been beautiful. But for the first time, James looked at her and felt nothing at all. "You're not answering my calls," she said, pushing past him into the apartment. "I've been busy." "James, please, I know you're angry. I know the will was shocking. But we can work through this. We're married. We love each other." "Do we?" She froze. "Of course we do. I love you, James. I know my family has been awful, but that's them, not me. I've always been on your side." "File number 127, James said quietly. "Your brother asked you if you regretted marrying me instead of Dylan Rothstein. Do you remember what you said?" The color drained from her face. "You listened to them. All of them. Every single one. 127 files spanning 8 years of your family mocking me while you stood by and agreed." "I didn't. I was just trying to keep the peace, James. You don't understand what it's like with my family. If I defended you too much, they'd make it worse for both of us. You told your brother I was mediocre at my father's retirement party. I didn't mean. You told your mother you wondered what life would be like if you'd married someone richer. You told Melissa I had limitations. You laughed when Brandon said I was dragging down the family's collective net worth." She was crying now, the same tears that had worked on him 1,000 times before. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was weak. I should have defended you. But James, I do love you. Maybe I didn't show it right. Maybe I let them influence me too much. But underneath it all, I love you. You love what I am now. $74 million worth of what I am now. That's not fair. You know what's not fair?" James's voice was still quiet, but something in it made Catherine step back. 8 years. 8 years of making me feel like I wasn't good enough. 8 years of sighing when I talked about my job, of steering me away from conversations at parties, of apologizing to your family for my existence. 8 years of choosing them over me, every single time. I'll change. We can move away from my family, set boundaries, start fresh. I've already started fresh. I bought an apartment in Brooklyn Heights yesterday. 3 bedrooms, exposed brick, $2.3 million. I close next week. I'm moving my stuff this weekend. What? You can't. We need to discuss this. We're married. I've filed for divorce. Marcus Thornton is handling it. Because of the prenuptial trust my father established, you're not entitled to any portion of my inheritance. You'll need to get your own lawyer. Catherine's tears stopped as abruptly as if someone had flipped a switch. Her face hardened into an expression James had seen 1,000 times, but always directed at waiters, shop clerks, valet drivers, never at him. "You're making a huge mistake," she said coldly. "My father's attorneys will tear apart that trust. We're married, James. New York is a community property state." "It's not, actually. New York is an equitable distribution state, which means courts divide assets fairly, not necessarily equally. And my father spent $67,000 in legal fees over 18 years, making sure this trust is absolutely bulletproof. It's been reviewed by 3 separate law firms. You're not getting a penny. You think you're so smart now, don't you? Because you inherited money you didn't earn from a father who lived like a miser? You're still the same pathetic teacher you were last week, James. Money doesn't change that. You're right, James said. I'm still a teacher. I still care about my students. I still think education matters more than luxury brands. Money didn't change who I am. It just freed me to stop pretending your family's values had anything to do with mine. Fine, keep your money, but don't think you're going to find anyone better than me. You're boring, James. You're safe and predictable and boring. I settled for you, and you'll never do better than me. Maybe not, but I'll do better than being with someone who thinks of marriage as settling. She grabbed her Hermes Birkin bag, $47,000, a gift from her mother, and walked to the door. Then she turned back, and for just a moment, the mask slipped. She looked lost, scared, younger than her 32 years. "Did you ever really love me?" she asked quietly. "Yes," James said honestly, "but I loved who I thought you were. The woman who told me on our 3rd date that money didn't matter, that she wanted a partner, not a provider. The woman who said she was tired of the shallow people in her world and wanted something real. I loved that woman with everything I had. I was that woman. No, Catherine, you were playing that woman because you were rebelling against your family. And the moment you got tired of rebelling, you went right back to being exactly what they raised you to be." She left without another word. James stood in the empty apartment for a long time, feeling the weight of 8 years lifting off his shoulders like a physical thing. His phone buzzed with a message from Marcus Thornton. "IRS meeting scheduled for Tuesday, 9 a.m. Real estate agent will call you this afternoon. You're doing the right thing." He wasn't sure about that, but he was doing what felt honest. And after 8 years of living a lie, honesty felt like a revolution. His phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Principal Thompson. I heard about your father's passing. I'm so sorry for your loss. When you're ready to come back to work, we'll have a memorial fund in his name. The students loved him. He used to help them after hours when their parents couldn't afford tutors. Take all the time you need." James stared at the message. Students loved him. His father, the secret multi-millionaire, had spent his free time tutoring kids who couldn't afford help. While the Westbrooks bought $47,000 handbags and mocked people who worked for a living. He knew exactly what he was going to do with his inheritance. But first, he had some recordings to finish, a divorce to finalize, and a new life to build. 3 months after his father's funeral, James Mitchell sat in a conference room at the headquarters of the Internal Revenue Service in Lower Manhattan, watching Richard Westbrook's world collapse in real time. "Mr. Mitchell, these documents are extraordinarily detailed," IRS Special Agent Sarah Chen said, spreading out the papers James had provided across the table. "Offshore account statements, shell corporation filings, email correspondence with tax attorneys about hiding assets. How did your father obtain all of this?" "He paid Richard's executive assistant $125,000 over 12 years to copy files," James explained. "Michelle Harris. She's prepared to testify. Richard treated her terribly, made her work 80-hour weeks at $47,000 a year salary, berated her constantly, fired her last month when she asked for a raise. She has every email, every document, every shred of evidence you'd need to prove systematic tax evasion going back to 2009. Agent Chen exchanged glances with her colleague, Agent Marcus Wu. "Conservative estimate, Mr. Westbrook owes $18.7 million in back taxes and penalties. Criminal charges are likely. Tax fraud at this level typically carries a sentence of 3 to 7 years in federal prison." "Good," James said simply. The investigation had moved quickly once James provided the evidence. Richard Westbrook was arrested on April 3, 2024, at his office in Midtown Manhattan. The news made the Wall Street Journal, $4.99 per issue, digital subscription, Bloomberg, $39.99 per month, and the front page of the New York Times, $25 per month for digital access. Hedge fund CEO arrested in $18.7 million tax fraud scheme, the headline screamed. Brandon's hedge fund, Westbrook Capital Partners, had collapsed within days. Investors fled en masse, pulling out $247 million in assets. Brandon was forced to liquidate the fund, losing his $340,000 salary and his reputation in the industry. The short positions James's father had taken against Brandon's investments had paid out exactly as predicted, $4.3 million, which James immediately donated to scholarship funds for underprivileged students in the Bronx. Melissa's divorce from her cheating husband had been finalized in March. She'd gotten the house in Connecticut, valued at $3.2 million, but had to split their other assets. Her husband's affair had become public during the divorce proceedings, destroying his reputation at his practice. The surgical center where he worked had asked him to resign. Last James heard, Melissa was working as a yoga instructor in Westport, teaching classes at $35 per session. Patricia Westbrook had become a social pariah. The story of how she'd mocked a janitor's son at his father's funeral, only to discover the janitor was worth more than her entire family, had spread through Greenwich society like wildfire. 3 country clubs had revoked the Westbrooks' memberships. Patricia's charity board positions had been quietly eliminated. Her friends stopped returning her calls. James felt no satisfaction in their downfall. Not joy, not triumph, just a quiet sense that the universe was rebalancing itself. What he felt instead was purpose. The Brooklyn Heights apartment he'd purchased had become his sanctuary. 3 bedrooms, 2,200 square feet, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River. He'd furnished it simply but comfortably. No designer labels, no status symbols. Just a home that felt like him. 1 bedroom he'd converted into an office. Another into a guest room. The third, to Catherine's horror when she'd seen photos during the divorce proceedings, he'd left empty. For what? His lawyer had asked. I'm not sure yet, James had said, but I'll know when I see it. The divorce had been finalized on March 15, 2024. Catherine had fought the prenuptial trust for exactly 3 weeks before her attorneys informed her it was unbreakable. She'd received her share of the marital assets accumulated during their marriage. Half the furniture from their old apartment, her car, a 2021 BMW 3 Series, $43,000, and $87,000 from their joint savings account that had been funded entirely by her family's gifts over the years. She'd moved back in with her parents in Greenwich. James had heard through mutual friends that she was dating Dylan Rothstein now, the man she'd wondered about marrying instead of James. They seemed happy in the photos on Instagram, posing in front of his Porsche Cayenne, $89,000, his yacht, $2.4 million, his penthouse in Tribeca, $8.7 million. James hoped she got what she wanted. He genuinely did. For himself, he'd kept teaching. That had surprised everyone. Marcus Thornton had suggested he retire, travel, enjoy his wealth. His colleagues at PS 147 had assumed he'd quit immediately. Even Principal Thompson had told him, James, you don't need to be here anymore. You could do anything. But James had realized something in the months after his father's death. He liked teaching. He was good at it. His students needed him. And having money didn't change the fact that education mattered. What the money did change was how much he could help. On May 1, 2024, James announced the creation of the Robert Mitchell Foundation with an initial endowment of $25 million. The foundation's mission, to provide full-ride scholarships to students from low-income families in the Bronx who wanted to pursue teaching careers. My father believed education was the great equalizer, James told the New York Times in an interview. $25 digital subscription, but the article was shared 47,000 times on social media. He also believed that great teachers are worth more than hedge fund managers and corporate lawyers combined. This foundation is his way of proving it. The first class of Robert Mitchell scholars, 12 students, each receiving full tuition, room and board, and a living stipend for 4 years of college, was announced in June. The total cost, $1.7 million. James didn't blink. He'd also made a $5 million donation to PS 147 to renovate the building, upgrade technology, and create a permanent fund for classroom supplies. The school board had wept at the meeting where he presented the check. "Mr. Mitchell, this is more than our annual budget," Principal Thompson had said. "Then it should make a real difference," James had replied. But the thing he was proudest of, the thing that felt like his father's true legacy, was the after-school tutoring program. James had hired 15 retired teachers at $35 per hour, 3 hours per day, 5 days per week, to provide free tutoring to any student in the Bronx who needed help. The total cost? Approximately $819,000 per year. The program was housed in a rented space on Grand Concourse, 2 blocks from his father's old apartment. They called it Mitchell's Place. In 4 months, they'd helped 347 students improve their grades. 17 kids who'd been failing math were now passing. 8 students who'd never thought about college had started preparing for the SAT. The daughter of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to make ends meet had just gotten accepted to Columbia University with a full scholarship. Her name was Maria Rodriguez. She was 17 years old, brilliant, driven, and terrified that college was impossible because her family couldn't afford it. James had called her into his classroom at PS 147 on a Tuesday afternoon in late July. "Maria, I heard about your Columbia acceptance. Congratulations." "Thank you, Mr. Mitchell." She looked down at her hands. "I don't think I can go, though. The scholarship covers tuition, but not housing or books, or I'd need to work full-time, and my mom needs help with my little brothers, and—" "What if I told you there was a solution?" He'd handed her a folder. Inside was a letter from the Robert Mitchell Foundation offering her an additional $15,000 per year to cover housing, books, supplies, and living expenses. 4 years, $60,000 total. Maria had cried. Her mother, who James had invited to the meeting, had cried. James had gotten a little misty himself. "Your father would have loved this," Principal Thompson told him later. "He used to tutor Maria's older brother for free. Did you know that?" James hadn't known, but it didn't surprise him. His father had understood something the Westbrooks never would. That wealth wasn't about what you owned, but about what you could do for others. 6 months to the day after his father's funeral, James returned to Riverside Memorial Chapel. Not for a funeral this time, but for a meeting. Catherine was waiting in the same conference room where the will had been read. She looked different, thinner, more fragile, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of designer clothes. Her wedding ring was gone. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would. Your lawyer said it was important. It's not about the divorce. That's done. I signed everything. You won." She laughed bitterly. "Though I guess winning is relative when you lose everything else. How is your family?" "Dad's in federal prison. 18 months plea deal. Mom sold the house in Greenwich. Had to. Couldn't afford the taxes anymore. They're in a condo in Stamford now. Brandon's working as a financial analyst somewhere in New Jersey, making $87,000 a year. He calls me drunk sometimes, crying about how we lost everything." "And you?" "I'm a yoga instructor. 23 classes a week at $35 per class. I make about $42,000 a year. Plus, I'm finishing my certification to be a life coach." She met his eyes. "I'm actually happy, James. For the first time in my life, I'm not competing with anyone or trying to impress anyone. I'm just existing. It's terrifying and liberating." "I'm glad." "Are you, really?" "Yeah," he said honestly. "I never wanted revenge, Catherine. I just wanted to stop being treated like I didn't matter." She nodded slowly. I listened to some of the recordings. Marcus Thornton sent me copies as part of the divorce evidence. I made him stop after the first 10. I couldn't believe that was me. The things I said, the things I allowed them to say. I treated you like you were disposable. You treated me how they taught you to treat people you considered beneath you. I know, and I'm sorry. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am genuinely, desperately sorry. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside the conference room window, Manhattan sprawled in every direction. Millions of people living millions of lives, each one convinced their struggles and triumphs were unique. James's father had understood that every single person mattered. The janitor and the CEO, the teacher and the hedge fund manager. All equal in the ways that actually counted. Why did you want to meet? James asked. Catherine slid a check across the table. It was made out to the Robert Mitchell Foundation for $15,000. It's everything I saved in 6 months of teaching yoga, she said. I wanted to go to a scholarship, in your father's name. He was a better person than anyone in my family, and I never appreciated that until it was too late. James looked at the check, then at Catherine. She wasn't crying, she wasn't begging. She was just trying, in her imperfect way, to do something right. I'll make sure it goes to a student who needs it, he said, taking the check. Thank you. She stood to leave, then paused. Are you seeing anyone? Dating? Not yet. I'm focusing on the foundation, on teaching. Maybe someday. You'll find someone wonderful. Someone who sees what I was too stupid to see. That you were always enough, exactly as you were. After she left, James sat alone in the conference room, holding the check. $15,000 that represented 6 months of hard work from someone who'd never worked hard at anything in her life. It wouldn't change the foundation's impact. He'd donated $25 million, and $15,000 was a rounding error. But it meant something anyway. It meant people could change. Not always, not easily, but sometimes. He thought about the empty bedroom in his Brooklyn Heights apartment and realized what it was for. 3 weeks later, Marcus Thornton showed up at Mitchell's place during evening tutoring hours. James was helping a 10th grader named David with algebra when the lawyer appeared in the doorway. Mr. Mitchell, do you have a moment? They stepped outside onto Grand Concourse. It was early August, humid and hot, the kind of New York summer evening where the heat rose from the pavement in visible waves. There's someone I'd like you to meet, Thornton said. Her name is Rachel Kim. She's a social worker with the city, works with foster kids aging out of the system. She's brilliant, passionate about education equity, and she's looking for partners to help create a program giving former foster youth access to college prep and scholarship resources. Why are you telling me this? Because your father knew her. She was one of his students at PS 147 30 years ago. He tutored her for free, helped her get into college, changed her life. When she heard about the foundation, she reached out to me. She has a proposal for a partnership that could help hundreds of kids every year. What's the budget? $3 million annually for the first 5 years. James didn't hesitate. Set up the meeting. Thornton smiled. Your father told me once that you had his heart. He was worried the Westbrooks would crush it out of you. But he also said if anyone could survive them and come out stronger, it was you. I didn't survive them. I survived because of him. Everything he taught me, everything he showed me about what actually matters. That's his real inheritance, Mr. Mitchell. Not the $74 million. The values that guided how he lived and how he raised you. After Thornton left, James went back inside Mitchell's place. 15 tutors working with 47 students, all of them learning, growing, reaching for something better. This building, this program, this purpose, it all felt right in a way nothing in his marriage to Catherine ever had. His phone buzzed. A message from Principal Thompson. James, just heard that Maria Rodriguez got a paid internship at the Columbia Law School for next summer. $7,500 stipend. She's calling it the miracle that started with your father's kindness. Thought you should know. James smiled, typed back, "Not a miracle, just what happens when someone cares enough to invest in people instead of stock portfolios." He looked around Mitchell's place, at the students bent over their textbooks, at the retired teachers patiently explaining concepts, at the walls covered with college acceptance letters from kids who never thought higher education was possible. This was what $74 million looked like when you understood what wealth actually meant. Not designer handbags or penthouse apartments, not country club memberships or luxury cars, just people, helping people, building futures instead of hoarding resources. The third bedroom in his apartment, the empty one, he'd finally decided its purpose: an office for the foundation, a place to plan programs, review scholarship applications, meet with kids who needed mentoring. Rachel Kim's Foster Youth Initiative would start there. So would a dozen other ideas he'd been developing. His father had spent 41 years as a janitor, building a fortune in secret while helping students who couldn't afford tutors. He'd lived modestly, saved meticulously, and left behind a legacy that would change thousands of lives. James Mitchell was a high school history teacher earning $61,500 a year who happened to have $74 million in the bank. He drove a 2012 Toyota Camry, lived in a nice but not ostentatious apartment, and spent his free time running a tutoring program and a scholarship foundation. And for the first time in 8 years, maybe in his whole life, he felt wealthy in the way that actually mattered. Not because of the money, because of what he was building with it. Because of who he was becoming without people telling him he'd never be enough. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming exactly who you were meant to be, without apology, without compromise, and without the people who never saw your worth in the first place. James looked at the students filling Mitchell's place, their faces intense with concentration, their futures opening up with each equation solved and each concept mastered. "Dad," he said quietly, to the empty air and to the father who was listening somewhere, "I get it now. I finally get it. The wealth wasn't the point. It never had been. The point was freedom. Freedom to choose kindness over status. Freedom to invest in people instead of impressing them. Freedom to build something that mattered instead of chasing something that sparkled." His father had given him $74 million, but the real inheritance was the lesson that came with it. You're worth more than other people's opinions of you, and the only validation that matters is living according to your own values. James Mitchell had learned that lesson the hard way, but he'd learned it, and that, in the end, was worth more than all the money in the world. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.